All right, folks are starting to trickle in. Welcome, welcome. Really happy to have you all on the call today. All right. Hey, everybody. My name is Jill Pape. I'm going to be starting us off with facilitation today. We're going to give it just a moment for all the folks to get out of the waiting room and into the call. But if you're in here and hearing me now, we'd love to have you introduce yourself in the chat. If you have a chat box open on Zoom, you can go ahead and type in your name, maybe where you're calling in from. Um, and we'd love to hear from you. So please say hello. We've got folks trickling in, but we're going to get started in just a moment. You are in Constituent Lobbying 101 training. So we're going to be talking about how to influence your elected officials. I see John, Leonard, Andy, Janet. Oh, nice. A lot of Texas, Arizona. Thanks for calling in. Very exciting. The greatest city in America. I need to know which one it is. I don't know. Maybe it's Boston. That's where I'm calling from. I don't know. Probably not. It's too snowy here. Baltimore. Hello. Welcome. All right. We're going to kick it off. We're at 2 minutes past. So welcome to Constituent Lobbying 101, how to influence your elected officials. We are, um, we can go ahead to translation instructions. I wanted to let folks know that we have Spanish interpretation on this call. So if you would prefer to listen to this call in Spanish, you can just click on interpretation at the bottom of your screen. And I might be lagging, but if we could click to the second slide, that would be great. I don't know if other folks are seeing that yet, but here we go. Yeah. So if you would like to listen to this call in Spanish, click on that little globe at the bottom of your Zoom and then click over to listen in Spanish. And we have live interpreters on today's call. So that option is going to be available to you. Few logistical notes. We can click ahead to the next slide. Really want to encourage folks to ask questions. You can type your questions. The best way to do it is in the Q&A. That's the best way to make sure we see your questions. If you put questions in the chat, it might be harder for us to see. So type your questions into the Q&A box. You're also going to find that at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You might have to click on the little More button and then go to Q&A from there. But that's how to ask us questions as we go. All right, let's get started. So I'm going to first share a little bit about Solar United Neighbors. Actually, no, first I'm going to introduce myself. Liz, you can click ahead. My name is Jill Pape. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm the organizing director for Solar United Neighbors. A little bit about us. Solar United Neighbors is here so that more families can benefit from affordable solar energy. So we help people go solar, join together, and fight for their energy rights. This training will be all about the third one, fighting for our energy rights through grassroots lobbying. So what is lobbying? To put it simply, it is communicating with decision makers to influence their position on an issue. I want to say sometimes when people think about lobbying, it can call to mind more negative connotations like corporations and big money working the system on behalf of special interests. But the kind of lobbying that we are talking about today is grassroots lobbying on behalf of policies and laws that protect our rights and ensure justice and promote the common good. So big money is quite good at lobbying, which is why it's so important for regular people to come together and use this really effective tactic in our grassroots advocacy work. You can go ahead to the next slide. So January kicks off a lot of state legislative sessions, which is why we wanted to take this moment to talk about lobbying, as it is one of the most impactful things you can do to push forward solar legislation in your state. There are a lot of ways to make sure that legislators are hearing from you. This is not the only tool in your toolbox. You can send emails, you can make phone calls, you can write them on social media, you can write a letter to the editor, and many, many more. But there's nothing quite like making an ask directly to your legislator or one of their staffers. And lobbying can be done at every level, local, state, federal. And this training is kind of going to cover all of them because the basics are going to be the same no matter what level you are lobbying at. So there are a few different places that the lobbying meeting can take place. You can click ahead. So lobbying does not mean you have to go to DC or your state capitol building. That's certainly one way you can do it, but you have a lot of other options too. If you're trying to talk to a US senator or congress member, meeting them in DC is an option, but you're probably not going to want to buy a plane ticket just to do this. So the other option is to meet in one of their district offices, which is going to be closer to where you live. You can find a list of their district offices and figure out which one is nearest to you by just going to their website. For state elected officials, it's generally the same. You can meet with them locally when they're in district or in the state capital. And then lastly, most elected officials will be happy or maybe even prefer to meet over a Zoom call. So virtual meetings are becoming a lot more common, and it's definitely the most convenient way to meet with your elected officials and is still quite impactful. So one thing to note, we can go ahead to the next one, is that depending on who you're scheduling a meeting with, there's a really good chance that you'll actually be meeting with one of their staffers. For almost all federal legislators, this is going to be the case, and for a lot of state legislators, this is the most common outcome for a meeting. And meeting with staffers is great. So you generally will get a little bit more time. If it's a federal elected official, maybe it's like 20 or 30 minutes instead of 10 or 15. Although it really depends on the state and the district and the legislator, and what level your lobbying meeting is at. But staffers are really knowledgeable, and they can usually let you know where the elected official stands on the issue that you're talking about. And they also have a lot of influence with the legislator. And to really increase your influence, you can also work towards building a relationship with a staffer over time. So what makes a good lobbying visit? You can click ahead here. So first, stories are really important. Legislators are going to pay much closer attention if you share why this issue matters to you personally. Why does this affect you? So really sharing a tight personal story that shows why you care about this is going to go a long way. Another thing is preparing in advance. So it's really helpful to have run through what you want to say so that you can make sure you're communicating clearly and staying on time. It's also helpful to prepare by doing a little bit of research on your legislator and finding out, if possible, where they currently stand in this issue. The third thing I'm going to highlight is listen to what they have to say and be responsive to that. Don't just come in like a robot with a script and then leave. You really want this to be a two-way conversation with your legislator or their staffer. The fourth one is so important. You need to make a clear and direct ask. So for example, I'm asking that you champion plug-in solar legislation to ensure families like mine can benefit from affordable energy. And give a bill number if you have it. So the clear and direct ask is so important, and it's actually easy to forget because you can kind of get caught up in the meeting and forget to come back to it. So last one is follow-up. So you can ask during your meeting what the best way to follow up is, and then make sure you do it within 24 hours. It's a good chance to restate the ask that you have for them and also answer any additional questions that they might have had for you along the way. And the follow-up really shows them how serious you are about the issue. So last thing I'm going to say is most people are nervous to meet with elected officials. This is totally normal, and you should do it anyway. There is so much solar policy happening at the state level, and your voice is critical. Also, elected officials have a lot of meetings with constituents who maybe don't follow best practices. Maybe they talk for too long or don't have a clear message or don't make a clear ask. And so Um, I really just can't overstate, like if you come prepared, you can really stand out and make an impact with your meeting. So with that, I would like to introduce Representative Tristan Rader. Representative Rader is a state legislator representing Ohio's District 13. He's also the former Ohio State Director with Solar United Neighbors, so he's been on both sides of the equation when it comes to lobbying. So welcome, Tristan. We're very excited to be with you here, and I wanted to ask if you could share a little bit about what it's like being on the receiving end of a lobbying conversation with your constituents.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here and to be back with Sun. It's an exciting sort of like I don't know, crossover episode. It's a very interesting to be here with you. And I love this picture. I did I've only been in the legislature a year, but before that I was on city council for 7 years in my city. I represented about 50,000 people. Now I represent about 130,000 people in the east side of Cleveland. But now I represent the largest Hispanic community, in fact, the largest Puerto Rican community in the state. It's still a very diverse ward in terms of the mix, but 19% of the ward is Hispanic. So this is me in one of my dozen coffee events where I hold listening sessions, mainly focus groups around the district to understand what's going on. And that's one thing that I'll reiterate about what Jill just said, and some things I just want to reinforce. I think would probably be the best thing I can do because she said it all, really. And that's um, your reps are in their districts a lot, and especially if they're state reps or state senators. And if you're reaching out with a personal ask yourself and not just an organization with an ask, in your own words, you're reaching out either by phone or email, there's a good chance you can get a meeting with that rep in district, or you can get invited to one of these types of events where they're listening to people and you can actually voice your concern. I cannot stress enough how important it is to put it in your own words, and how important it is that you do reach out, because what I feel trying to reach out to our federal representation sometimes, even as a state rep, it can be difficult. Sometimes you feel like you're not being heard when you're sending these messages. You feel like you're screaming into a void sometimes. And that can go on either side of the aisle too, because these are really busy individuals. Sometimes their staff are even stretched thin, responding to 12 million different people in a state, right? But I will guarantee you, even when I get, let's see, in a regular week, maybe I get 150, that's a slow week, 150 folks reaching out for different things. Busy week, it will into the thousands if there's like legislation moving or a budget moving for a state rep district. It's a lot. Can't imagine what they're dealing with at a statewide sort of congressional or Senate level. What does matter is, and what absolutely every single rep does in the state house, any federal representation does, is they do keep track and they do count who's reaching out. So I say this to say, even if you don't get a response back or you get a boilerplate response and it doesn't feel like you're being listened to, they're noticing how many people are reaching out and they're keeping track of that. And I'll hear it from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. I feel it too. I'll give you one example. Library funding in the state of Ohio has been under threat. And when that came under threat, we love our libraries. I got 1,200 emails in one day about that from my district. And that mattered, right? I could tell I know where they live because they submit their address if they're smart. And then I can verify quickly that they're real individuals living in my district who care about the specific issue. It didn't really even matter at that point. They were kind of boilerplate emails. It mattered that many people in my district cared. That made a huge difference in discussion in the entire state legislature about library funding. At the end of the day, we didn't cut library funding. All right. So, it wasn't us as Democrats pushing up against the Republican majority to do that. It was really the people just flooding our inboxes. Yeah, sure. A lot of those people didn't get responses personally from me. They got a response that like said how much I support libraries, how much I'm fighting for them, but it was pretty boilerplate. Maybe some of them aren't even happy with the fact that like I couldn't call each one of them back directly, or I couldn't give them any more tailored of a response at that volume. But it did affect the conversation. It changed the outcome of that particular issue. So all that to say, incredibly important. I love this thing that Jill mentioned about telling your story. And I'll take that a step further. Tell your story, but also if you're really serious about this and this is your representative, do a little bit of research. Google them, figure out where they came from, figure out the legislation they're working on, figure out what committees they sit on. Any mix of that, right? You don't need all of those pieces, but if you do any work at all, I'll tell you the conversations that stand out in my mind are the ones that somebody says, Tristan, I know that you're come from city council and you passed an ordinance in Lakewood that limits carbon emissions. That's fantastic. I was interested to see if you want to talk about doing something similar, at the state level. That instantly got me engaged, right? Because, oh my gosh, this person is from my district. They care. They're paying attention to the things I'm doing. We're aligned, right? On something. Or if you're not aligned, maybe, find other aspects of their background that you might be able to speak to. So I think those are some tips that I think I've definitely, because sometimes we're in 50 meetings a day during budget time, like literally, excuse me, 50 meetings a week. 50 a day would be absolutely crazy. Maybe Congress is doing that. But 50, like, and on top of like committees, on top of going to session and working on legislation and meeting with staff, 50 meetings with constituents or groups a week, things tend to get lost in the sauce. You want to make yourself stand out. And I think at the state level, you'd be surprised at how many reps will meet with you in your district if you reach out, if you make that call, if you do that email, and you live in that district. If you're of the same party, absolutely mention that. If you're not of the same party, you can probably not mention that. But it does matter when people feel, when a rep feels like they have something in common with you or they have some shared values that you can work together. And that, by the way, when I introduce something and you brought me this idea, you're going to show up, right? It's important that I have cover, and you're the folks that are going to help us get something done if we end up actually moving through the legislative process. So it's a first step in building that relationship. So I've talked a lot. Feel free to. I think we might be doing questions later. I'll just turn it back over to Jill and take it from here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So yeah, in a little bit, we're going to shift focus to how to lead your lobbying meeting and how to prep for it. But before we do that, I just want to see if anyone has questions for Representative Radar while we have him here. Feel free to pop questions into the Q&A if you've got them. I think we're going to let him go in a few minutes since he's got a lot going on. But let's see, we've got one question here. So when organizations, for example, Defenders of Wildlife, Audubon Society, etc., have an issue that they want all of their donors to sign a petition, is it true that state and federal reps or senators ignore these auto-filled letters from their constituents?
Good question. I spoke to that a little bit, but they certainly track the numbers of people who are in that specific district. It matters to me whoever reaches out for whatever reason, but well, the first question I'll ask is, do I represent you? My job is to represent the 130,000 people in my district, not to represent somebody from Illinois or something, regardless how much they might care about issues I care about. So I do count how many people and if they live in my district, because then I'll know. And I think all reps do that to some degree. I would imagine there's more people that are more or less dismissive of different groups and issues. But on whole, we definitely count the number of folks in our districts that support a specific issue or oppose a specific issue.
Okay, thanks. I've got a question from Matthew. So, what are some tips when working to find common ground with an elected official of a different party?
Yeah, I think and this is something we learned when we were doing our advocacy work at Sun. There are values that transcend both parties that are very fundamental. Like for solar, it's energy freedom, energy democracy. Generating power locally is certainly a value of a small c conservative, right? Keeping things local and actually freeing yourself from this monopolistic sort of grid and structure. Free markets to sell and buy power, which is something that we're trying to move towards here in Ohio so that we get away from this monopoly utility mindset. Those are things. So there are like these ways we can talk about it. Agrovoltaics also, when you're talking about solar, something that's becoming more popular across the party lines. So just finding those touch points. In Ohio, you're not going to lead with global warming. You're not going to lead with environmentalism. You may lead with conservation. That's something. So finding those touch points that cross those lines.
Nice. Got a question from Leonard. Is Ohio considering balcony solar?
I have a bill. Thanks to Sun, thanks to the work of some people in my district. Here's a good example. I was just left the Democratic Club. That's where I was a minute ago. I was left it a little early to come here. And on the way out, Glenn, a buddy of mine, somebody who helped me run the first time I ran, and a precinct person, volunteer extraordinaire, pulls me and says, "So you have that? You doing that bill? You doing that bill for rooftop solar or for balcony solar?" I'm like, "Yep, we drafted it. We took it out of the Utah playbook. We're going to be introducing it here sometime this year and hopefully getting it done next year." So, advocacy works, believe it.
All right. From Andrew, he asks, is it better to go in with more than one person? to your lobbying meeting?
You don't have to, but maybe for your like, if it's something you're like not fully 100% like comfortable with, highly recommend doing it in groups. Groups of up to 10, no more than 10, because our offices generally, even congressional offices, aren't that big. But two or three folks, it's always a good thing. And yeah, I like this idea. There's other strategies, but it doesn't really matter. What matters is show up, try to connect on a personal level. Leave behinds are also kind of important. If you have something that you think you're going to want them to get done, having something you leave with them or their staff, because we track that. We keep some of those things, not all of those things. We keep some of those things that they pertain to, hey, there's this bill, here's a copy of it, or here's this bill, we want to get an amendment, here's the type of amendment we want. Instead of just saying, hey, you should amend this and do this or that and leave. If you have a leave, we call them leave behinds. If you have a leave behind, that's always helpful too.
Awesome. Just jumping around a little bit. Okay, so question from Noy. Is it useful to call or email more than one time about a single issue to an individual legislator? Or do they track that and then dismiss when it's a repeat?
Think about it in terms of building a relationship, and you can build relationships with staff too. If you feel like you're having a good connection and you've let that staff know, hey, this is a good conversation. I'd love to follow up. Can I follow up with you? Maybe ask even, can I follow up within a week or two with some more information or with these things that you've asked me for? I think that is probably more productive than just calling and saying the same thing over and over and over again. You're absolutely welcome, and you can do that. You can call my office over and over again. There's nothing prohibiting you to never tell anybody not to do that, especially if you're passionate about something. But try to use those multiple opportunities to build that relationship. And if you're talking to staff, try to kind of build it to a point where they trust you enough to set up a meeting between you and that representative would be my goal.
All right, great. Let's take I think we can take a few more. Uh from John, how do you effectively function when in the minority? Are there tricks?
Yeah, I think it's good if you can like my disposition is naturally not to be too in despair. Um, and I think you feel the pressure sometimes of being in the more. I took it the other way. My glass is always half full. I'm not really responsible for anything. Like, I mean, I can't really pass a budget, right? I can't screw the state up too much, but I can put forward really good ideas. And every now and then I can get a Republican to join me on it. Like we're going to be doing something to hold data centers accountable with a Republican to pretty much make sure the data centers, when they show up in Ohio, they're bringing their own energy, or they're going to at least pay full freight when it comes to interconnecting to our grid. The Republicans like that idea because they're getting the same pressure that I'm getting from residents about data centers coming and taking our land and water and resources. So there's lots of opportunities. It just really depends. It's like everything.
Um, all right. How about from John? How much influence does lobbying by a donor have, as opposed to a simple constituent lobbying?
I think there's two answers to that question. I think there's like the answer. I got to be careful because I answered this too honestly one day and it was recorded. I think this is being recorded because the answer is, I think for those of us that really try hard to represent the people we represent, um, we try to limit that influence of money. In fact, we limit who can give us money, even sometimes a self-limit, so that we're not unduly influenced by money. But broadly speaking, money has a lot of power in politics. Until we can remove money from politics, those dollars do speak very loudly, and they're in the ear of some of the most powerful people in our states. So you're absolutely right that money has a lot of influence. And until we fix that, it's going to continue to have a lot of influence. But it doesn't necessarily mean you don't have influence. And I want to make that very clear to you. When you show up, at the end of the day, I have to stand for election every 2 years, as do every one of my colleagues. And that's a general election where Democrats and Republicans are voting. And there's always somebody running against you. So there is a system where your vote matters, your voice matters. And I highly encourage you to participate in that. And also give it to the people you like. I mean, give it to the people that share your values and you want to see continue. I think that's not a bad thing either.
Yeah, well said. Is calling your representative more effective than emailing them?
Well, that's a great question. I think every office is different. I think those of us that are maybe under 40, and I'm under 40 till May. I turned 40 in May. Probably like emails, texts. I try to. I can still do it basically at this point. all the different socials to kind of get an understanding of where, not comments, I can't follow comments anymore. Do not wade into the comment sections. But if you send me a message on Instagram or TikTok or any of these other apps, I usually keep track of that. If you call, I get a readout once a week right now while I'm not in session. Session starts next week. From my aide about the numbers of people calling, and she'll count different people that have called the office. That and every now and then she'll forward me emails like, "Hey, this person really needs you to reach out," or "This person has a specific issue. We need to deal with it. I don't know how to do it, and I'll help her deal with it, or I'll respond directly if it's something that I need to." And honestly, the more detailed the email is, the more sort of specific and honest and straightforward, and obviously not a template. And this person is genuine. Like I've instructed my staff to send those things directly to me because I'll want to, if they're from my district, I'll want to like literally engage and try to answer, even if they're kind of, even if we don't share values. And I think some reps try to do that because they see that genuine sort of approach from our constituents.
All right. Well, I'll just end with one more question for you, which is any words of advice for someone who wants to reach out to a state representative and they're nervous, they're doing it for the first time. What would you say to them?
Yeah, just do it. They're people like you. And maybe make you feel a little better to like research them a little bit, Google them, see what they're like. And you could even just find one fun fact about them and just bring it up with them. You don't have to, you doesn't have to lead anywhere. Like, oh, I heard you have a dog. I have a dog too. That's cool. Because again, if it's about building a relationship, and who knows how if you're going to hit it off, and maybe you'll make a friend, and then if your legislator's your friend, you can call them. Maybe they'll give you your cell phone. There's all like anything you can do to sort of influence growing that relationship. But yeah, thank you so much. And for those of you folks that are in states that may not support, I see that a lot of those comments kind of flooded here, like about what are the arguments? How do we promote solar in places where maybe the legislatures aren't as friendly? I think Sun's just done a fantastic job of framing this energy democracy, energy freedom, and really walk that line. So just stay connected with the group, and I think they'll have lots of resources to help you connect with those legislators and the aisle. We just passed community solar in the House, the Ohio House of Representatives. Supermajority generally doesn't support these kinds of ideas. We passed community solar this year out of the House because of your advocacy, because of the work of Sun and so many other people that have really taken the politics out of it and focused on the economic arguments and all the things that Jill and others are working on, Roger and Liz. So stay engaged, and I really do appreciate you guys engaging here and for taking the time with me today.
This was wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. I learned a lot and really appreciate you answering all these questions and spending some time with us. So thank you so much for jumping on tonight. And yeah, look forward to seeing you next time.
My pleasure. Take care, guys. Thanks.
All right. Great. So Liz can pull the slides back up and we're gonna get into now how to lead your lobby meeting. So we've talked about why, how it looks on the other side. Now we're really gonna get into how to do it. So I'm gonna hand it over to my colleague Liz Veazey to introduce herself and walk through some of these next slides.
Okay, sorry, just tech issues. Hey everybody, great to be here and really great to hear from Tristan. He may have already left, but he's doing really great work and did some great work when he was at Sun in Ohio that laid the foundation for the Ohio House passing community solar. And we hope to see that pass in the Senate later this year. So very exciting. I'm Liz Veazey and I'm State Policy Campaigns Director at Sun. And I've been working on clean energy in some way for about 25 years since I was a college student. And I was working on solar when I was in college, trying to get solar panels on campus at UNC Chapel Hill. So ever since then, and I currently live in Omaha, Nebraska. So I will try not to be too repetitive of Tristan. Some of the stuff I had is very similar to what he said. But yeah, so next we're going to talk about the how. And like Jill said, you want to make sure it's not hard to make your meeting stand out. The bar for a good meeting is probably lower than you imagine. So by following some best practices, you can have a great meeting, make a big impression. So I think one of the questions was about, should I go with one person or more than one person? I think it's great to go with a group and bring different perspectives and stories. Felipe is nodding, I see, and we'll hear more from him later. So I would encourage that. But, I think, as Tristan said, you can also go by yourself. But so figure out who you want to go with. Meet beforehand if you can, figure out who's going to say what stories people are going to share, and try to have people, be really focused and only speak for a few minutes. So scheduling the meeting, you'll need to find the contact info and reach out, about the specific dates and times that work for you. Sometimes you can also just reach out to the office and ask, when they could meet in a certain week, and they may have a very limited schedule already. Let them know what you want to meet about. I added be persistent here, as, I've had to email 2 to 3 times to set up lobby meetings. Most of the times that I have set them up, I even emailed one office in Florida 3 times, spread out over the course of a month. I never heard anything back, so I just assumed they ignored my emails. But then something came up related to solar policy about a month later, and then they remembered seeing my emails about solar that they never replied to, but they reached out to me about this thing that came up about solar. So keep trying, be persistent, and realize that you might even be building a connection even if they don't respond, which, wouldn't have expected. And I think Tristan talked about this a bit about, learning about the official, thinking about how you can connect with them. I think that's really important. So, sometimes that can be hard, but like, where did they go to school? What organizations are they connected to? Have they done work in the community? Is there some vote they've taken that you can agree with, that you support, that you want to connect with them around, just as a sort of, initial place of connection? Or you could think about statistics and information that connects with like the messaging or framing or commitments that they made in their campaign. So, if economic development and jobs are super important, you could talk about the $18 billion of annual contribution to Florida's economy and more than 40,000 jobs supported by rooftop solar in the state, for example. It's helpful to have those studies done that you can reference. And, we don't always have that information for every state, but that's one example. You could talk about energy, about freedom, if they talk about that a lot, and the freedom to generate your own electricity and reduce your reliance on a monopoly utility that continues to raise rates. So just really think about where they're coming from and how to, best connect to that. And I think Jill and probably Tristan both touched on, personal stories being really important. And so thinking about what matters to you and how you can best communicate that. Are you a solar owner? You've benefited from solar. You want to make sure that others have the same opportunity. Maybe you're a renter who can't, hasn't been able to go solar, but you want to be able to put plug-in solar on your patio. Stories are really the things that people will remember and can be really helpful and powerful. So in West Virginia, a few years ago, Sun set up a meeting with Senator Manchin's team, and we were able to recruit a rural small business owner, JQ Dickinson Saltworks, that had received a Rural Energy for America program or REAP grant to go solar. So they joined us and told their story of REAP helping them go solar and save money on energy so they could better invest in the success of their business. And then Manchin eventually ended up voting for the Inflation Reduction Act, which expanded the funds available for REAP grants for agricultural and rural small businesses. And these funds, much of the IRA has been rolled back, but these funds have actually not yet been terminated or canceled. So anyways, put in some research, figure out how you can connect. Think about, try to figure out if you know their position going in, if they're on the fence or they don't support the issue, or maybe plug in solar. So, ask them to support it. If they already support it, you can ask them to be a champion. So yeah, really important to make sure that you make a clear and direct ask. And you might want to say it at the beginning and then, talk about the why and the stories briefly, and then like circle back at the end on that. So, it can be easy to sort of get wrapped up in the conversation and forget. So really important to try to remember to make an ask. So, will you protect my right to produce my own power and lower my energy bills and oppose HB 741? Or, if you're meeting with them just to build a relationship, maybe there's not a specific bill, but you just want to share your story, talk about the importance of rooftop solar. You could just ask more broadly, will you stand up for the rights of solar homeowners? Okay. I think we have touched on this before, but reiterating the importance of listening to the elected official and or their staffers, trying to think about what do they care about, what are their concerns, respond to any questions they ask, and take note of those you're not sure about, and make sure you follow up on those. You can always reach out to us for help if you need that. Make sure to confirm who to follow up with. You might have scheduled the meeting with a constituent liaison, but you might want to follow up with the policy director, for example. So just make sure you confirm. If the representative opposes your position, you want to be respectful and express your disappointment. But then, it's really important to ask what they might need to reconsider their position. And so, that makes a great thing to follow up on if you are able to help, provide information that could help them reconsider. And then if the representative supports, express your gratitude, thank them, reiterate how their support will positively impact you and your community, and make sure to just, whatever their position is, thank them for taking the time out of their busy schedules to meet. I think Tristan touched on this already, but we were also going to just touch on leave behind materials. So I think those can be really great and really helpful if you have something that, has your contact info and has just some brief bullet points and facts about your issue. Practice. You don't have to memorize what you're going to say. You don't really need to, but it's really helpful to run through a few times, be comfortable with what you're going to say. Try to get everyone together and sort of plan who's going to say what, and make sure there's enough time to listen and have the elected official share. All right. So leading your meeting, probably your meeting will be 15 to 20 minutes, though sometimes they'll schedule a 30-minute meeting. But, it's a very tight time, so you really need to make sure you make a clear ask and make sure people share, concisely share their stories, and listen to their legislator. And remember, it's their job to meet with you. Okay, I think I am wrapping up and about to turn it over. But I think we've touched on many of these things before, but important to be respectful, have a conversation, listen to them, clearly state who you are, and what you're asking. Make sure to share your story and end with that ask. All right, I think that's it from me. Jill, you want to turn it over?
Yeah, so I'm excited to introduce one of our volunteers, Felipe Munoz, who I believe got a call from Sun like a little less than a year ago that was like, "Hey, will you fly to DC and come talk to your Congress members with us?" And he said yes, and so did some really cool lobbying at the federal level on Capitol Hill with Sun, and so we wanted to just hand the mic over to Felipe to share a little bit about what that experience is like, so you can hear kind of what it's like as a person on the lobbying side. So Felipe, I'll hand it over to you.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay, good. So yes, Jill, like you were saying, when I first got I think it was an email, right? I was like, is this spam? Is this a scam? And then I was like, very excited, right? I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go and I get to go to Washington, D.C. I had never been to Washington, D.C., right? But I'm very passionate about, solar power and any clean energy, right? So I really jumped at the opportunity. And like Liz and I'm gonna forget his name. What was his name? The representative that was just with us?
Tristan, Rader.
Yes, was saying, it's like I think I'm pretty good at telling my story, right? And I tell my like, real story here in Omaha, like, like how my neighbors will ask me, like, how did you get the solar panels? What are the benefits and that kind of stuff. And that was the story that I told, right? But I do want to give huge kudos and credit to all of you at, Sun, because it was like really a great experience, right? So it all kind of like, um, tied up with this, like, again, clean energy, and it for me, it's not just the benefit of like whatever you save or not, but that I know that I'm polluting less. And that's kind of like, the story that I tell. And even if I go with representatives, and Liz, the representative from Nebraska was completely like, I mean, like a farm boy. You guys know Nebraska is a very, farming state and everything. And I kind of like, pointed out his boots, like talk about making a connection, right? Which I was like, and then we like got into the conversation. I'm like, well, you know, the grid of Nebraska and all of us supporting, even if it's just with a little bit, to like not use more energy, it's quite helpful. And I think that's when he kind of like I was like, oh, okay. I was like, you have a point. So, but Jill and team and everybody on this call, right? I'm weird in the way that I'm not intimidated by talking to anyone. I'm not. It's just my personality. But I like to be sincere and I like to tell them like, to me, having my solar panels and benefiting from it and having clean energy is such a I don't know, it makes me feel good. But then I also tell like, my neighbors that because I had the opportunity to buy the solar panels because I was a, new homeowner, right? And I don't think everybody has that opportunity. So I also convey that to the representatives. Like, people ask me, is like, what if I'm not a first time, home buyer? Like, how can I get these, solar panels? And so all in all, for me, the experience of like, going into their little office, and I, again, the representative was saying, yeah, don't go more than 10 people. I think it was six of us, and it was a small office, and I was nodding when I said, like, yeah, but do have like, an expectation set for yourself, and also what is it that you want to communicate to that representative. When you tell your story, tell a positive story, and don't be disappointed if they're not, aligned with you. On the contrary, try to make them see, like, it's like, hey, it's like it doesn't matter on what political side you are. This is benefiting all of us. in the long run. So that's what I can share, from my experience.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I love I love the connecting about his boots. And I'm gonna think about what Representative Rader said too about making a personal connection, and that's such a good example. So yeah, I'm learning a lot tonight. So think about what questions you have for Felipe. We'll take questions at the end. I think we have a few more slides to go through, and then we'll have questions for Liz and Felipe and me and anyone else from tonight. So I'll hand it back over to Liz.
Thanks, Jill. I will try to be fast. I know we're running out of time, but just wanted to touch on some of the work we're doing at the state level. Most of our state policy work is focused on promoting distributed power plants, plug-in solar, community solar, along with protecting net metering and fair credit for solar sent back to the grid. So distributed power plants bring together distributed energy resources like rooftop solar, energy storage or batteries, electric vehicles, smart thermostats, and more to sort of lower peak demand and use existing resources in an affordable way to help us meet the energy needs we have. And Shannon Anderson, who is here helping us answer lots of questions, thank you, Shannon, is our Director of Distributed Power Plant work, and so a real expert on that. And all of this policy work is really helping us get to affordable, local, clean energy and helping people have control over where their energy comes from and over their energy bills. And since Sun's big focus on our national sort of campaign focus for the year is on plug-in solar, I just want to touch on that briefly. So, we're focused on this because it's really helping make solar even easier and more affordable and accessible for renters or anyone. I can't put solar on my roof. It's pretty shaded, but I could potentially put it in my front yard that's less shaded. It's really flexible and it can still help reduce your energy bill. So we have a plug-in solar guide and an action that I think I can put in the chat. So if you want to learn more, and then our action is a general action, and if there's legislation in your state, which we have a list here that I think is relatively up to date, although things change every day on this front. But yeah, if you take our action, it will then show you a confirmation page that will list the direct actions for each state that already has a specific bill introduced. So you can take that specific action. It's a little clunky, but it's the best we've got. So our focus on plug-in solar is really making sure that it's clearly legal and people have the ability to just plug in. Particularly, we want that ability for small systems below 391 watts, so about one panel. And we want to make sure there are appropriate safety guidelines overall. So that's been really the focus of that work, but there's bills filed in about 20 states, with I think at least 6 or 7 more in the works for this year. And then there's at least 4 or 5, some states don't have sessions this year and others are teeing it up more for next year. So a lot going on. I think I will, stop with this slide. So there's a QR code on the left for our English lobbying guide that really goes in detail through a lot of this information. It's a really great resource, really thorough. And then on the right, there's the link for the Spanish guide. Feel free also to reach out to us at any time. Get involved at solarunitedneighbors.org or advocacy at solarunitedneighbors.org, and we're happy to help.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much, Liz. So we talked about a lot, and we want to open it up for Q&A. So go ahead if you have questions for about anything we talked about today. You can pop those into the Q&A. I've got a few already in here, so we've got about 10 minutes, and we'll get to as many as we can. This question, I wonder, Liz, if you would want to speak to this. So, would you recommend meeting with a representative that may not be in your district, but may be supportive, as well as meeting, in addition to meeting with your own representative?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think, generally representatives are most, or elected officials are most responsive to people in their district. So I would definitely encourage that as sort of people to do that. But I think, you can also attempt to meet with others, and maybe most effective if you can find a constituent from the district to join you in that meeting. And maybe you could go together as a team, and at least one of you is from the district. I often attend lobby meetings with Sun, and I'm not from that district, but sometimes I am. But sometimes I just go with, our members who are from that district, right? And sort of, so I think you can do both.
Yeah, yeah, and I know there's nuance sometimes around committees and some flexibility, but yeah, definitely meet with your own representative, primarily. So let's see, what do we have from Matthew? What are some tips for maintaining a beneficial relationship with an elected official outside of general assemblies and lobby meetings? So what else can you do to grow that relationship with your elected officials or their staffers?
That's a good question. I think they would probably say you should go to their fundraisers and their events. You could also go to community events where they're speaking and, try to listen to, try to pay attention to what they're saying and, follow up with them potentially about that. I think, having trying to check in with them maybe regularly could help build that relationship, and or sending them, updates or information if there's a new report or something, that happens that is, you think may be a good resource. I think if you, send them things semi-regularly, kind of like the story I told earlier about the office, I emailed 3 times and I thought that they completely ignored me, but then they followed up. So I think being on their radar and trying to send them things and, trying to connect and learn about what their interests are and, send them things, every month or two, I think could help continue to build that relationship.
And Liz, if I may, I think you said something important, right? Finding what their interests are. And even though Jill and team, I'm not a sports person, sometimes if you connect through that, it's really a way to get into it. And it kind of you got to remember a lot of these busy people, it's like once they hear someone that is oh, it's yeah, they're coming here for with the set agenda, but they're also interested in me. They kind of want to know about me. So yeah, do some research, see what are the things that they like, and they may connect with you, and then they see oh, it's I can see, why Felipe likes his, solar panels, and so yeah, just be yourselves, be natural, be real. I think they really, really appreciate that.
Yeah, 100%. Love the sports, the sports one especially. Yeah. Um, I just so I was inviting folks in the chat if anyone has been to lobbying meetings in the past, feel free to like pop into the chat and share your experience. And Matthew had a great comment in here. So he said in previous lobby meetings, we've begun the meeting with an appreciation. So just thanking them for championing a cause or public funding they helped secure. Just something nice to break the ice with them. And it's usually separate or unrelated to the primary topic of your lobbying. Yeah, that makes so much sense to just like Tristan said, these are people and it can really, yeah, break the ice and warm folks up to do something like that. Let's see, I'll pop back over to another question. Noy asks, does prep for 2027 session mean that Solar United Neighbors is already working directly with the state legislature? They said they live in Montana and the governor vetoed community solar this summer.
Ooh, Shannon, do you know anything about that? Put you on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, I know that groups in Montana, of course, are interested in trying again. So yeah, in general, when we say like prep for 2027, it really is kind of building this momentum into the session. So a lot of it's, legislator education and kind of directly meeting with folks to hopefully get them in a different direction than they were before. I mean, again, the challenge I think with that bill in Montana is the governor. So it may take, another year to get that going too, depending on who's in the office. But yeah, I know groups are interested in trying again. It was a very bipartisan supported bill. So
Thanks, Shannon. I thought you'd have more insight since you live somewhat near Montana. Yeah, do we have another question, Jill? It's running on time.
Yeah, I'll read a couple more comments from the chat that I like. So Jeffrey says attending virtual lobbying meetings, even if you don't speak, is a really great sort of apprenticeship and very easy. That makes so much sense to me. Like sometimes it helps to see something done before you're doing it yourself. So that's a great way to do it. And Adam also said if you've never lobbied before, a lot of orgs like Sierra Club and maybe Sun. In fact, yes, we do this in a lot of states, have lobby days. So a bunch of people show up together at the Capitol and you're briefed on issues and talking points, and then you go around with a group and meet with representatives in the Capitol. So it's a great introduction to lobbying. And you typically get a lot of support from the organization who's organizing it. So yeah, totally second that, Adam. We're running low on time, so I'm gonna pick one last question from here. Maybe something a little bit broad. Brad asks, what's the best way to advocate for solar? So I think that's a great way to close us out. There's a few ways we can answer this. I can start and then Felipe and Liz, if you want to weigh in too, that'd be great. But I think there are lots of ways you can advocate. I mean, we mentioned it on this call a little bit, but there are a lot of ways to get in touch with your elected officials, to push for, figure out what what policies are being proposed in your state, pushing for bills, writing emails, making phone calls, doing constituent lobbying, really like take the leap and do it. But just reaching out and building relationships and pushing for policies is a really great way to advocate for solar. And I'll hand it to Liz or Felipe if there's anything you want to say about this.
I can tell you, I do very simple things. Wearing my Sun t-shirt gets questions, like I'll go to Chipotle and people will be like, oh, where's that t-shirt? Like the one with the American flag and Sun. Having my mug with Sun at work, which I shamelessly do, which I'm not supposed to, but I do. And then people will, ask you questions. And, of course, having the solar panels and the sticker on my car, the sticker on my car, sometimes they're like, hey, I saw this, like, what's that sticker about? I'm like, well, it's like, because I have solar panels. I'm like, oh, it's like, so the simple things sometimes will get, those questions. People will ask you those questions and they'll be, yeah, you can go into it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Be out there, talk to people, everybody about solar. It sounds like Felipe is really awesome at that. I will say, just sharing your story can be really helpful. I mean, we've had legislators say we want to do solar consumer protection because people reached out to us and told us their stories, right? And like we didn't do that. Constituents did that. And in Virginia this year we had a bill introduced that we weren't expecting to help end this unfair demand charge that's only put on solar customers that have larger solar systems. And we've wanted to get rid of that for a long time. And the legislator was just like, yeah, people reached out and told me their stories and I wanted to help. And so now we're working on the bill and helping move it forward and helping share more stories. But, it can be powerful just to share your story about what's happening and, what needs to change.
Absolutely. So thanks everyone so much for being here. We are going to send around tomorrow morning. We'll send a link to the recording and a link to all those ways you can take action, including the downloading the lobbying guide in English and in Spanish. And just want to really encourage folks again to get out there this legislative session, stretch out of your comfort zone a little bit, do some lobbying. If there is a plug-in solar bill moving in your state, we would really love to work with you, and we'll follow up with ways to do that if you're interested in lobbying elected officials around plug-in solar. But you can use this for any issue, solar or otherwise. So please reach out to us anytime with questions at getinvolved@solarunitedneighbors.org, and we're really excited to help you get started. So thank you again. Thanks so much, Felipe. Big thank you to Rep. Rader, who was here earlier, and Liz and Shannon, and the interpretation team at LingoVox. So glad to have you all. And thanks to everyone who tuned in today to learn, and hope you follow up. Thanks, everybody.
Adios.